Good morning, Saints. Here with you again, and we are going to just about conclude 1 Samuel today. I might have a few references to it next week as we begin 2 Samuel, but we're going to start in chapter 24, 1 Samuel. And at this time, David is hiding in the wilderness of En-Gedi. I happened to be there when I was touring Israel in 2011. This is a very unique place. It's near where the Dead Sea Scrolls were founded in the caves of Qumran. And it is incredible. The views, there are like deep ravines, gorges there that you cannot really go down into and climb up. It's pretty much impossible. So David is hiding out in this area, knowing Saul is pursuing him. Saul has like a blind obsession. He sets out with 3,000 men to capture David and eventually kill him because he's threatened by David believing that he's meant to take his job, his position as king. Amazingly, Saul enters the very cave where David and his men are hiding out. How is that for the providence of God? And yet, David doesn't kill him. There is not going to be any assassination attempt here to take the throne in a wrongful way. So what happens is Saul falls asleep and David comes over and cuts off part of his robe and then leaves. And then he says on one end of the ravine, as Saul is back with his men, that he had the chance to kill him and did not do it. Why? Because he saw Saul as the Lord's anointed. So he wouldn't take things in his own hands. And that's a real lesson for us. Sometimes we believe we're being led in a particular manner when we need to wait on God and see what he's going to do and how he's going to intervene in certain situations, especially in relationship with people. Sometimes we want to force the hand, and that this is a good lesson for us right here. So David didn't take things in his own hands, and when he's engaging with Saul in verse 9, he says, "Why do you listen to the words of men, saying, 'Behold, David seeks to harm you'?" He's appealing to Saul, saying that unscrupulous men with false charges were, basically saying at this time that Saul is trying to kill David because of these words. Some time has gone by here, all right? We said that David was hiding out in the wilderness, going here, there, everywhere for about 10 years altogether. Saul is overwhelmed. He acknowledges his guilt. I think deep down inside of him, he knew that David was meant to be king, and he admired him. I mean, he killed the giant. He saved Israel. But he couldn't be trusted. David could not trust him because of Saul's spasmodic bursts of anger and rage and melancholy and all these kinds of things. So they come to a place where there's kind of a pretended reconciliation. Saul acknowledges that David's words were true for the time, and he goes back to his home, and David continues to hide out in the caves. Then in chapter 25, we have Samuel passing away. It says, Samuel dies, all Israel gathered together and mourned for him and buried him in the house of Ramah, at his house. A national monument here national burial rather, created because Samuel was revered by the people. And at this point, obviously, he's gone from the scene. We'll see, not quite toward the end of this lesson here. So David, after this, he moves his headquarters to the land of Paran in 25:1. And he's offering the services of some of his men as a custom in that time to protect flocks and herds of shepherds and, farmers, these kinds of people who had cattle and animals. And a man named Nabal is one of the ones that he is offering protection to. Nabal, maybe unbeknownst to him. And the custom was when you have protected these sheep, say, and they go to be sheared, your men would receive gifts from the people as a thank you for the fact that they were watching over, keeping the sheep safe. No prowling Arabs would take any of the sheep because of these men. Nabal dismisses the men. And he says, who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? It was a real insult. He's violating an ancient custom here. And David becomes enraged at this man. Amazingly, all the turmoil he goes through with Saul and endures it, and yet hear a few insulting words and he's ready for bloodthirsty revenge. So he sends the army, and he's about to attack Nabal, he's not a warrior, he's a farmer, a sheep grazer. And so Abigail, Nabal's wife, comes out and in humility falls before David. She gives him gifts. She's loaded up, pack mules or whatever to give David food and supplies. She recognizes David as the next king of Israel, and she also prophesies over him. She honors him. David turns away from Nabal, his wrath, and he remembers Abigail later on. What happens? The Lord strikes Nabal in 25, 25 and verse 38. It says, 10 days later, Nabal had a stroke and he died. His heart became as a stone. Isn't that amazing? And so David hears about this, and he goes and he takes Abigail as a wife. Now you might be saying, how many wives does David have? There's going to be more. Right now, he has Abigail and he has Ahinoam. He also had Michal, who was Saul's daughter. She's given to another man while David is in exile and a fugitive. So just an amazing story here of how God is favoring David. You might say, what about the polygamy? It was tolerated in those days, not encouraged, but tolerated. So Abigail's goodness and intelligence impressed David, and a concern about his future. So he offers to marry her, and he also takes a woman named Ahinoam, as it says in verse 43. These things, especially Ahinoam and the later wives, result in really consequences that are really, troublesome to David. And again, we have him returning to Ziph, and Saul hears of it, and he goes and tries again to capture him and kill him in chapter 26. There is again a place where David can sneak down with one of his men, Abishai, while Saul's men are resting. And this time he takes Saul's spear and a cruse of water and goes back across the ravine and yells out to Saul, same thing. It's the same scenario. He's saying, why have you come out to destroy me? Am I not like a flea? And David is portraying himself as, I'm not going to harm you. I'm not going to kill you, which he was not. Abner is the one who is the general of Saul, and he first hears of him. Then Saul comes in and says, is that you, my son David? And again, we see that there's no confrontation. And this is the last time David is going to see Saul. Killing Saul was not the way to win a throne. We may see people doing wrongful deeds, but again, you need to let the Lord deal with them and intervene. Sometimes, yes, the Lord may send you to be a person to offer correction and discipline or whatever, but with leaders, a lot of times, God intervenes on his own and brings justice. So sometimes we get in the way of God, don't we? Thinking that, we are going to be his instrument of change. So Here is a period of time after this where David falls into somewhat depression, discouragement. I mean, after so many years of being hunted down, running, hiding, all these things taking place, he basically says, I'll die one day by the hand of Saul. What does he do? He goes and he aligns himself with the Philistines of all people. Goliath was a Philistine. And by doing this, he's renouncing his Israeli citizenship to become a Philistine. No direction from God is being sought here. In 27:1 is the story here. He says, there's nothing better for me than to escape into the land of the Philistines. Saul then will despair of searching for me anymore in the territory of Israel, and I will escape from his hand. This was not the leading of the Lord. He does this, some commentators call this David's backslidden time. A year and a half he stayed with the Philistines. And Achish is the king of the Philistines, and David makes himself out to be an ally, like he's fighting the enemies of the Philistines. That wasn't the case. He was fighting Amalekites and people like that who had no dealings with the Philistines. Achish believes him and eventually makes him a commander in his army. Saul hears about this and he thinks there's no way he is going to become the king of Israel because all the people will look at him as a traitor. Being a man who joins the Philistines, he would cease being a rival for the throne. So David is falling into despair in all of this, and he doesn't seek the Lord on it. Year and a half with the Philistines, he identifies with them. And what happens to Saul at this time? The Philistines are looking for the kill. They're rising against him. They're going to take him out. And in chapter 28, we have an interesting story. Saul goes to the Witch of Endor. He had originally gotten rid of all witchcraft in the land. There's this one woman who continued in the practice. Saul is looking for a word from the Lord. No prophet, no Urim and Thummim, nothing, no direction. So he goes to this witch to see if she will conjure up Samuel, who will tell him what to do. This is a very controversial story, and it's debatable in terms of, is this the real Samuel? So he goes incognito with two other men. Eventually, the woman, as she begins to conjure up Samuel, recognizes that it's Saul. And he says, I'm not going to harm you. What do you see? He heard Samuel's voice, but did not see anything. And in 28, the woman says, I see an old man, a divine being coming up from the earth. And he said, what's his form? He's an old man coming up wrapped in a robe. And Saul knew that it was Samuel. He bowed with his face to the ground and did homage. Samuel rebukes him. Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? He says, I'm greatly distressed, for the Philistines are waging war against me. God has departed from me and no longer answers me, either through prophets or dreams. Therefore, I have called you that you make known to me what I should do. And Samuel, true to form, says, why then do you ask me, since the Lord has departed from you and has become your adversary? And then he goes through a little history here of his disobedience and all of that. And he says, tomorrow you will be with me and your sons, as the Lord will give you over into the hand of the Philistines. Some people don't believe this was the real Samuel. I believe it was, and I'll tell you two reasons. One, the woman cried out. She was afraid. When she was bringing up apparitions, that would not have, messed her up. So she cries out. She's in fear of this. Secondly, why would a demon rebuke Saul for disobedience? That wouldn't make sense. I believe God overruled, providentially allowed Samuel to come up and give this word to Saul, that he was going to die. It was a judgment word. So what's the issue here? Obviously, we are to have nothing to do with familiar spirits, seances, astrology, witchcraft. Some people today gloss over that, probably because of the influence New Age has had upon the church. And they don't see this in the biblical light that's it's being portrayed here with this story. So we are to have nothing to do with it. And we see Saul is pretty much devastated by this word. He won't eat. They urge him. He eventually arises at night, and he does eat, and he sets forth to the final battle with the Philistines. Now back to David, what happens here? Achish is promoting him. He will fight the Israelites with us and for us. The generals in his army say, no, he'll turn on us on a dime and begin to fight and defeat us as he has in the past. So they basically appeal to Achish and says, you got to get rid of him. He had been given a city called Ziklag. That's what was his headquarters when he was among the Philistines. They say, go back there, do not engage in the battle. If David had fought his own country, how history would have been changed. He would not have become the king of all Israel. So this was a really important lesson here for him. He returns to the Lord. He begins to seek God again, and we see that he's out of the picture as Saul begins to fight the Philistines. Ironically, Saul has driven out the one man who could have saved Israel, but out of his jealousy, his paranoia, his fear, his superstition, his greed, all these things, he kept David on the run and would not allow him to come back into the camp. So they pursue the fight with the Philistines, and we'll talk more about that next week. Philistines have archers. Saul, remember, not many weapons. And we'll see that next week as we talk about that. One last thing on the Witch of Endor. Familiar spirits can impersonate but not produce the dead. People spend money to go to fortune tellers and these kinds of things, and they want a loved one for sentimental reasons to be conjured up and told to them about their whereabouts, their safety, all these their concerns. They pay money. A lot of this is what they call, they're charlatans. They're not really spirits. They're voices that are impersonating and all of these things, but sometimes they are spirits. We have nothing to do with familiar spirits or the demonic as believers. So Saul, look where he's fallen from, incredibly. I mean, driving out all the witches out of the land, started out good. We'll talk more about him next week as his life is ending. And some of his accomplishments were good in the beginning, but he falls. And this is what concerns me, is leaders need to finish strong. You start out well, grace of God is upon you, you've got giftings, you're equipping, you're discipling people, you're doing missions trips, you're feeding the poor, you're doing all these things, and a series of events can take place that can turn you away from the Lord, harden your heart, and before long, you're in a place of bondage, sin, maybe even opening yourself up to the enemy. So a word to leaders here, finish strong. The grace doesn't diminish. The grace of God is always there for you, and it is something you need to sustain over the course of your ministry. So that's what's happening here. Next week, we will finish the story and also David's victory over the Amalekites, and we'll conclude 1 Samuel, probably break into 2 Samuel next week. All right, take care. God bless. Have a good weekend.